This is part 2 of the video where I dive into the work of Lester Levinson. In this video, it's going to get really good because we're going to talk about all of these negative core thought programs and learn how to release them. We're also going to talk about some of the fun stuff that Lester's created, such as AGFLAP, CAP, and what those acronyms mean and how they can help us in our process of releasing. I'm also going to briefly touch on the Sedona Method, as well as getting into the subtle nuances of how to effectively let go. But before I begin, if at any point you find that this information is helpful, then please like and subscribe so more people have access to this video. Releasing programs. Lester says that our programs are negative emotions, and that's what's keeping us stuck. That's what's keeping us from not being able to go free. I actually talk about this in another video that I made called Master Your Emotions. And in that video, I discussed this at depth, but I'll quickly go into it here. So our emotions are like buckets, and within each of those buckets are thousands and thousands of thoughts. The reason why it's so advantageous to let go of an emotion is because you're releasing thousands of thoughts with it. So it's a much faster, direct path to letting go. And this is why Lester is calling these programs. So getting rid of an entire program is much, much faster than just focusing on a single thought pattern. This is where Lester's work gets really good. What he's done is that he's identified these basic foundational programs that we all have. And he's identified the first ones that we need to let go of. And those are approval, love, control, and security. What I like about this so much is that whenever you're going about your life and something hits you, something hits those samskaras or those wounds or those negative feelings, those programs, you can identify very quickly what quadrant that you're in. You can realize, oh, am I doing this for approval? Am I doing this because I want to be loved? Am I doing this because I need to feel secure? Am I doing this because I want to control the situation somehow? Now, they're all interconnected, right? Like if we're trying to control something, it's because we want to feel secure, or we want to feel loved, or we want approval, which is why this is the first bunch, the first bucket of programs that we need to release, because it's at the very base of our survival mechanism. What's really interesting that Lester brings up in regards to these 4 base emotions that we need to release first is that underneath all of them is the fear of dying, because that's what we're protecting. What we're protecting is our own survival. It's really the survival of the ego, but we don't realize that. So if you keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper, the base level underneath everything is the fear of death. And Lester says that that is the final frontier. That is the final thing that we need to let go of is our fear of death. Okay, to take a step back, once you've released those 4 base foundational programs, he talks about aversions and attachments. What I really like that he says is that our aversions and attachments are actually opposite sides of the same coin. Our attachments are what we want to hold onto and keep close to us. And our aversions are what we want to hold on to, but keep away from us. So we're still holding on to both of those things. One of them is just close to us, and one of them is away from us. Every time we have an aversion to something, we want to know exactly where it is. We want to know that it's out there and not in here. So again, it's a form of resistance. AGFLAP. One of the funniest acronyms that Lester Levinson created is AGFLAP. It reminds me of AFLAC, but we won't get into that. AGFLAP stands for apathy, grief, fear, lust or desire, anger, and pride. Now, the reason why he created this acronym is so that we can quickly identify where we are on that scale. The bottom of the scale being apathy, and then moving all the way up to pride. So if you know that you're in an apathetic state, then you know that you're at the very bottom or base level feeling that you could be having. And he says that as we continue to let go of each of those layers, we'll move all the way up to pride. Once you pass that pride, the next 3 layers of emotion are courageousness, acceptance, and peace. What Lester Levinson does next is really interesting. He breaks up AGFLAP and PAC into 2 larger buckets, and those buckets are havingness and doingness. He takes the first 3 emotions from AGFLAP, he takes apathy, grief, and fear, and he puts those into the bucket of havingness. And what he means by having this is he says that 95% of the population on planet Earth is in a state of havingness. They're in a state of wanting to have something. They're grasping, they're reaching, they're trying to obtain something from the world. And he says this comes from a slave mentality, feeling that you're a slave to the world. He says even people who have a job have a slave-like mentality. They think that they need to go out and get something because he thinks that if everyone in the world was aware of their true nature, then the need for people to work for one another would dissolve because we would be in a state of total cooperation. And then the next bucket that he uses, the doingness, he says takes up about 3 to 5% of the population. And these people are using the emotions of lust, anger, pride, and courageousness. To be a doer in the world is to be able to go out and do things in your own way. So these are maybe more the entrepreneurs of the world. Doers of the world are trying to make change. They're trying to actually do things. So they're less about trying to get and more about trying to do and implement change. And then the last and final state, which he's not really using as a bucket, but he's saying it's the highest state, is the state of beingness. And he says that when you're in a state of beingness all the time, then you're enlightened. Then you're in a constant state, permanent state of non-doership. You're in that witness consciousness all of the time. And again, this doesn't mean that you're not taking action. It just means that you're not identifying as the one that's actually doing any of it. You're the one that's simply aware of all of the things that are happening. The 8 steps to freedom. This is where Lester gives us a blueprint in terms of what it is that we actually need to do in order to go free. The first one is you have to want freedom more than you want the world. Once you realize that nothing out there is ever going to fix the problem in here, that you can stop looking to the world to solve your problems. You have to want your freedom. That is the highest attainment that you can ever achieve in life, is your freedom. You have to want that more than all of the things of the world, than having children, than having a successful career, a job, a house, whatever it is that the world can offer. You can't want that more than your freedom. Number 2 is take all your joy from within by releasing. This is the part where he's talking about releasing and letting go, and how the more that we release and the more that we let go, we start to feel that inner joy within us. We take that back. That's our birthright. That's our natural state. Number 3 is make the decision to go free. Again, we need to commit to this as being the highest priority in our life. Remember, this is the purpose of our life, is to go free, is to become self-realized. So that needs to be at the top of our list. We need to want that the most. Number 4, and this is so Lester. Number 4 is do it. So just do it, do the work, right? Don't just make the commitment and then not do any of the releasing or the letting go. We have to actually do the work if we want to reap the benefits of letting go. Number 5, release the fear of dying directly. Remember, this is the final frontier in terms of letting go, is releasing the fear of death. So he says that we're going to have to confront this at some point, and that we should not wait until death is actually approaching. He advises to let go. Remember, when we're high, when we're in those high states, that's when we can work on this stuff the best, because he says that when you're in those higher states, you're much more able to stay in that seat of witness consciousness. When you're in the lower states and you're so down and out and feeling that those emotions have a stronghold on you, you've identified with your emotions, so it's going to be much harder to let them go. It's much easier to let go of an emotion when you're in a higher state because you're less apt to identify with it. Number 6, get everything that you could ever want by releasing. Now, Lester Levinson is very popular in the manifestation communities because people hear this one step and they think that what Lester Levinson is really teaching is teaching you how to manifest effortlessly. Now, in fact, he is teaching you that, but the irony behind it is that what he's really teaching you is to feel that you are everything. And once you get to that state, then you don't really want anything anymore. So he's not really teaching you that you should manifest what you want in your life, because he's not teaching you to want the world. He's teaching you to want your freedom. But he does say, why not enjoy your life while you're here? Why not make this dream a better dream? And the Course in Miracles does the same thing, but it doesn't ever let you confuse the fact that this is still a dream and that we still need to wake up. But the point that I want to make about getting everything that you want by letting go is that when you do release all of your attachments to what it is that you want and you let go of them, then things come to you much more effortlessly because you're in a state of effortlessness. And when you're in that state, you're allowing yourself to open up to all of these possibilities that you were blocking because you were so attached to what you wanted. Number 7, be not the doer. This point is just being drilled into us. It is so important that we be not the doer because what this means is that we're not allowing our ego to run the show. It means that we are not the one that is doing any of it. The ego always wants to think that it's taking credit for everything, that it's the one that's doing all of the things that are happening to it in the world. But in fact, we aren't doing any of it. We are the awareness that is watching all of it. Number 8, make your behavior like that of a master. I touched on this during the last video about Lester. He's so directly pointing to this idea that the more that we can behave like that of a master, the more it's going to allow us to bring up all of those little things to the surface that we need to let go of. Because when we attempt to do things perfectly, when we attempt to do things the way that we think a master would do them, then all of our programs that are blocking us from embodying that are going to come up. So it's a wonderful way to find our blind spots or our unconscious programs that we were unaware of. Letting go of resistance. One of the most common things that I face when I'm working with a client is their resistance to the process of letting go itself. So what I work on with them is the resistance that they have to letting go. In other words, we can work on the feeling of stuckness that you have around not being able to let go. Because so many times people will ask me, well, how do I actually do this? How do I let go? One of the best analogies that I find Michael Singer came up with is tug of war. Imagine that you're holding onto a rope like you would in a typical tug of war, and on the other side of the rope is an entire football team, and you're on the other end. And I don't care how strong you are never going to win that tug of war. So what he says to do is just let go of the rope. It's that simple. So letting go has this feeling of effortlessness to it. It has a feeling of lightness, of ease. And that's why it trips people up. Because we feel like if we're not actually doing something and making something happen, then we're not doing it right. Then we're not letting go. But you are. The more you feel a sense of lightness, a sense of ease, then you're letting go. So the key here is to realize that whatever roadblocks you're encountering that are stopping you, that are blocking you from letting go, we need to accept those things first. We can think of every roadblock as a child that we need to parent. We can accept it, we can bring it in, we can love it, we can just allow it to be going through whatever it needs to go through, whatever it needs to do in our body, and just allow that to be. And then once you do that, then you can move on to whatever it is that's beyond that that you want to let go of. Even something like, I'm having a vague feeling. I'm not sure what I'm even feeling that I want to let go. Then embrace the feeling of feeling vague, of feeling unsure, and allow yourself to just fully bring that in and be with that. By doing that, you're actually letting that feeling go. And then you can attack letting go of the thing below that or underneath that. Now, unlike Michael Singer, Lester Levinson actually thinks that we should dig for all of these feelings and pull them up and out and let them go. Lester really wants us to let go in a matter of months. He says that he did it in 3 months. And if he did it in 3 months and he didn't even have any of these things outlined for him, we should be able to do it in less than 3 months. So the key here is making a commitment to actually wanting to do all of this letting go. And he says that we need to commit to it so much that we actually start digging for it, that we actually let go when we're in a high state. He says the danger is that once you start letting go, you naturally start feeling lighter and lighter and better and happier, and you don't think about letting go anymore. And he says that is absolutely wrong because what we're trying to do is achieve total liberation. So we need to make sure that we make it a habit of letting go when we're high, when we're in those higher states of peace and acceptance and courageousness. When we're in those states, even the higher states like anger. I always tell my clients that feeling angry is actually an empowered state because anger is much higher on the scale, on the emotional scale, than something like apathy or grief or depression. So anger is a much more empowered state. So don't feel bad about where you are on the scale. Use the scale as a barometer to understand where you are, and then just keep working your way up higher so that you can really let all of this stuff go. Lester advises that we release all day long. It's sort of the way Michael Singer says, I want you to become releasing machines. Since we're on the subject of releasing and the subtlety around how you can release, I really want to make a point here that is so critical for you to remember. And that is that we must take complete responsibility for everything that we feel. Everything that we feel is our responsibility. No one makes you feel a certain way. We have to stop being the victim and we have to stop projecting all of our feelings onto others because that's just another way that we're trying to get rid of the feelings. We're trying to avert whatever it is that we're feeling. And so we're never going to release the feelings that way. Remember, when you have an aversion, you're keeping it right where you want it, even though it's outside of you. You're taking control and you're keeping it there. That's never going to allow you to let it go. The higher states of letting go. As we go through this journey of letting go, what begins to happen is that we actually feel things more. And this is another thing that trips people up that's so unfortunate, that when they start to begin to let things go, they actually begin feeling things more intensely. And so they think that they're doing something wrong. But because those emotions are so suppressed or repressed, you weren't even aware that they were there. And now, as you begin to let them go, they need to come up. And you're going to have to feel them briefly as they process and do their thing through your body. So it feels counterintuitive, but you're actually getting better. You're actually making progress the more that you feel. Another point that Lester brings up that's fantastic is that as you become freer, your resistance to the remaining garbage that you're holding inside of you gets less. Until he says, even the fear of dying just comes up and goes out. So this is really about getting good at releasing, not being afraid of practicing this stuff, and just becoming a releasing machine. The higher that you get, the less you have to release, and the easier it becomes. And what happens is that you eventually get into a state of being all the time because our state of beingness is our natural state. It's the true self. Now, the irony of all of this is that every master says that there's really nothing you have to do to be free because you already are that. You're already free. You just have to let go of this conviction that you're going to die. The Sedona Method. I want to quickly talk about the Sedona Method, even though it's not directly coming from Lester Levinson, but it is coming from one of his students, and it does very much have to do with Lester's work. So a quick breakdown of the Sedona Method is that number one, you identify the feeling that you're having. Recognize it and try to give it a specific name, like anger, sadness, fear, worry, whatever it is. The second step is that you allow the feeling. You permit yourself to feel the feeling without wanting to change it or do anything about it. You just fully accept the feeling and be with the feeling. Step three really has to do with a commitment to letting go. And the first question that they ask you is, could I let this feeling go? And as you ask yourself that, what you're really asking is it possible for me to let this go? And the next question you would ask yourself after that is, would I let this go? So this question really has to do with your willingness. The first question was, could I let this go? Is it even possible for me to let it go? And then this question has to do with, would I let it go? So are you willing to let it go? And then the third question after that is when? And this is obviously encouraging you to do it now. And this is really about facing this thing head on so that you don't leave the process of letting go for a later date. Because if you're unwilling to let it go now, then you're really unwilling to let it go. And then step four is repeat as necessary. So continue to do this all of the time. And then the fifth step, which is a really critical one, is that you embrace the new feeling. Embrace the feeling that you have after you've let go of something. Embrace the feeling of lightness, or maybe the feelings of love or joy or peace have come in. And it's really important that we embrace those and that we sit in those feelings so that we are encouraged to continue to release more and more. It's also important to recognize whether you've had any shifts in perception when you've released, so that you can realize that this is really helping you. This is, in fact, making a real change and difference in your life. I want to make one more point whenever you're practicing letting go, and it's that it's so important that you are gentle with yourself. It's really critical that you be kind and loving with yourself. This is not about beating these emotions out of you. This is about being with them and allowing yourself to feel them and process them and release them gently. I want to close this video by saying that I'm very passionate about helping people let go. If you feel that you're having a hard time with this, please send me an email and set up an appointment to work with me. I offer coaching sessions about spirituality, as well as energy healing sessions, and of course, sessions around teaching you how to let go and working with you directly so that we can release these negative programs. I love you all so much. Until next time, remember to let go. Let go of trying to be anything other than the truth of what you are.